It's Sunday, February 22, 2026. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. Our guest today is the founder and publisher of Courier, a pro-democracy digital news network with newsrooms right across America. Tara McGowan, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thanks, Anthony. Always a pleasure to be with you.
We have a lot to discuss, Tara, not least from the media perspective and the FCC. We'll look at that in just a little while. I want to start, though, reacting to the news that Donald Trump illegally used executive power to impose global tariffs. This is a ruling by the Supreme Court on Friday. Trump is not a happy man, as this basically implodes his entire economic policy for the US. And so instead, he came out and said he's going to impose a 10% global tariff and attacked certain Supreme Court justices after the taxes were ruled illegal. This is obviously something that we have been waiting for a decision on. Were you surprised? Because, some of us felt that the Supreme Court was so compromised that nothing that Trump did would be a problem for them. But actually, there's a lot of Democrats and American citizens and business owners celebrating right now.
Yeah, to be clear, the Supreme Court is incredibly compromised. Yes. There's no question about that. And we've also seen a pattern with the Supreme Court of delivering a few carrots to the American people before they often deliver a big stick in terms of their decisions. And, those of us paying really close attention are well aware that the odds that they overturn the Voting Rights Act in America is coming with the next round of decisions, either in the spring now or in the early summer. And so I feel like this is just sort of a perpetuation of that pattern, right? They pick and choose some things to make us all feel like, oh, they're reasonable about certain things. They are adhering to the Constitution and the rule of law on certain decisions, and then completely obfuscate their responsibility as justices in other decisions, as they did with granting this and future presidents complete immunity, right? As we all recall. And so, yes, this is a win. There's no doubt about it. This is really important that they overturned the tariffs. Of course, Trump's reaction is just as one would expect, like a petulant toddler, angry someone took away his toys. And so he's going to bully until, he's put back in his corner. And so I think that's what we saw with the aftermath of this decision. It always, it puts a pit in my stomach when they do make a decision that is favorable to the law and the Constitution because of what comes next is always what I fear.
And meanwhile, the US economy is not in a great state. The deficit is ballooning. Economic growth has slowed in the fourth quarter of 2025 amid the government shutdown. GDP grew 1.4% last quarter, down from economists' forecast of 3%. There isn't really much else apart from Trump's tariffs, which are, of course, paid for by importers and kind of working people when they do their shopping in the US. So how do you think he's going to square this? Because there isn't really the evidence to suggest that any of his economic policies are working. He's just realized that if you lie about it and take control of the information stream, we know he kind of fired the statistician because he didn't like the jobs numbers and stuff like that, that really this all kind of plays into this authoritarian, unitary government where he thinks that if he says it, it must be true.
That's right. That's always been his governing policy or approach. And I think it's notable you mentioned that he fired the statistician. We're no longer receiving the economic data from the government that we are accustomed to receiving, because if he doesn't like the numbers, he just doesn't let them be released any longer, which, is a parallel also to the censorship we're seeing in media we'll talk about later. So, there's two different ways of sort of thinking about this question about how does he square the fact that the economy is actually getting worse under this administration after he made enormous promises to address affordability of housing, of healthcare, cost of living, cost of goods in this country. And he has done the opposite. He has actually exacerbated those problems and increased cost of living, and with the enormous cuts to healthcare and healthcare subsidies and the resulting closure of rural hospitals and access to healthcare, these impacts have not even fully hit most Americans, and they will, and they're certainly starting to. And so the American people's economic confidence and just ability to be able to afford their lives is going to get exponentially worse, and is. And I do believe that is that the American people are very much aware of that and on to that. We're seeing that in his slipping support and favorability numbers, right? Their lives are not getting better while they're watching them focus on putting masked thugs in the street who are killing American citizens and imposing these tariffs in this, this boisterous way to try to bully other countries into paying him. Meanwhile, Trump personally, his personal wealth has increased by billions with a B, billions of dollars since he became president again in the second term. He is exploiting our government and our economy to increase his personal wealth. He's doing this by bullying foreign countries. He's doing this by imposing pay to play on CEOs and executives from the media to the tech industry. And the American people are not stupid. They're watching all of this because he's also not trying to hide it very well. So I don't believe actually that there are very many efforts to try to square this. I'm sure they'll come up with a few policies or hand out ideas to make it seem as though they're addressing these issues, but he nor his administration has never had a genuine interest in addressing these issues. And that's become much more apparent. The other way to think about this is that he doesn't care about squaring this because he doesn't care about winning another election, because he doesn't necessarily believe there will be another Democratic election in this country. And that's, I think, a really important piece of what's happening right now that we all need to pay really close attention to, because everything from, the hostage bribery note from Pam Bondi to Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, asking for the voter rolls in exchange for scaling down ICE operations in the state, which of course they dismissed outright because it was blasphemous and insane and illegal, to the illegality of them stealing voting records in Georgia recently, with Tulsi Gabbard literally stalking elections administrative offices in Georgia. I don't believe that they intend to win elections fairly, whether in 2026 or 2028. And we all need to be very, very clear-eyed about that, because none of it makes sense if you think that you are trying to build public support to win elections, right? None of the decisions they're making, especially in including these tariffs and the strain they're putting on the American people and our agriculture industry and our other, our labor industries, it's having a really horrific effect. And he does not care, because it's the cudgel he is using to increase his corruption and these corrupt relations abroad to enrich himself.
I just want to talk about how the media covers all of this stuff, because you and I have both worked in kind of mainstream corporate media in the past, and then we kind of defected and went independent and have kind of started afresh. And we have that in common. So we've seen behind the curtain, as it were. But, the media didn't really do a very good job of communicating the fact that the tariffs were paid for by the American public. Now, that was like an elephant in the room issue, wasn't it? It's like they played along because it was maybe good for viewing ratings. I don't know, but there was never enough pushback and analysis, in my opinion, of who actually pays the tariff. It was like the worst kept secret in America. And then when it comes to, as you just described, the voting going forward for the midterms, there is the worry that the media will just get into that rhythm, that business as usual rhythm. They have a format for covering election periods and elections themselves, where they will just pretend that it's a regular election, when of course it'll be anything but.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we also need to, I mean, there's a little silver lining in here, which is that corporate media does not have nearly the reach or influence that it used to have. And that is also declining rapidly. It's a harder thing to measure, I think, but it's something that I know you and I know intuitively and from the work that we do. Of course, they do still have an enormous amount of power at influencing elites, including the president, right? Which is why he spends actually so much time and energy being angry at them and forcing them into settlements and fear mongering with them, so they only cover what he wants them to cover. And he's done that quite successfully with corporate media. Once again, the American people are on to this. They are ditching corporate media in favor of independent media by the day. We're certainly seeing that at Courier and across our local network. The other thing is, so you know, the relevance of how they report on things and what they report on is declining, and we have to keep that drumbeat going and really encourage people explicitly to abandon corporate media brands that have capitulated to this administration or are failing to report accurately on this president because they do not want to lose their access or get sued for billions of dollars, as he has done to so many outlets. When it comes to our reporting across our network at Courier, we have been talking about who bears the brunt of these tariffs from day one, and communities have been engaging, right? We have seen him actually, flip-flop quite a bit as a very Republican-led agriculture community and industry came after him. He made exceptions for them. So, right, he's always willing to cut deals with people who are willing to cut deals with him. And so that reporting has made a lot of traction because we have been focusing on that drumbeat of you are going to pay for this. Who pays for this? The American taxpayers pay for this. The consumers in this country pay for this. As prices go up, this is why. And you know, when the news stories come about how he is posturing with foreign government leaders who he's imposing these on, he does not look like the strong man he thinks he does to the American people. He looks really quite foolish, especially as the ones have come out opposed to that. So, of course, the media has failed to tell this and practically every story accurately when we talk about corporate media. But I do think that independent media, like the work that you do, the work that Midas Network does, the work that Courier Network does, is filling that gap. And we're seeing that in the polling. We are seeing it, right? Opposition to the tariffs is high. It's the perfect example of how the media's lack of reporting or inaccurate reporting on it didn't really make traction the way that the work that we and others are doing to make sure folks actually know the facts related to this. And just in general, this is the theme, right? Like the emperor has no clothes. It's becoming more and more clear to even the folks that voted him into office every day.
Well, it was friends of his on the golf course who work in agriculture that were the ones that kind of tipped him off that actually deporting all of their migrant workers was actually not great business for them. He doesn't read the briefings. He doesn't look at economic statistics. Everything is, starts with hate, is his instinct, which narcissistically he trusts more than anything else because he knows more about everything than anybody else. There are no experts in the room. But this is why he has been given the name Taco, because he really is reversing things and often going back to how they were before he even started messing with them.
That's right. He has no core. He is not an ideological person unless the ideology is self-enrichment. Right. So he can flail in the wind and just go towards the direction of where can I get the most money? Where can I get the most attention? He is such a sad individual in that sense because we know that he does not have a core. I mean, I have more respect for true believers that I disagree fundamentally with about ideology and philosophy and power and how to use it than I do, right, to someone who truly it's just about himself and how he's feeling on a whim or who he wants to like him and how to appease them for his own self-interest. So it's just I often, I think actually quite a bit about the brilliance of Mayor Mamdani from New York City and that, absolute power move of going to the White House and really buttering up to him to the point that he could call him a fascist in front of his face with his permission.
Right.
And they got along in a jolly way. I think in general, Democrats and sort of the anti-MAGA movement haven't really taken advantage of the fact that the man just wants to be coddled and praised.
Right.
And
well, he doesn't have ideology of his own, really, does he? It's all about who he's appealing to, which audience he's talking to. But sadly, he has been infiltrated by these racists and white supremacists. Not that he's not a white supremacist racist himself. Of course, that is very much part of his DNA. But not to the extent that Stephen Miller would kind of push these policies upon him and make them national policy in the way that they have. So, I mean, how much do you think, because he is rotting, isn't he? We're watching him rot in public. So how much do you think now is still him driving these extremist policies? No. Or does he just want to focus on the arch and the ballroom, and it's actually these elder abusers around him that are causing the trouble?
I love how you put that, elder abusers around him. That's brilliant. And it is that. I do believe that Stephen Miller is the most dangerous man in the world right now, because he has carved out this ability to really drive his own design for cruel and unusual and frankly, Nazi influenced and informed policy regarding immigration reform and control. And just absolutely increase systemic racism in this country. He's a white nationalist. I do not believe that Trump even fully understands the breadth of Stephen Miller's ideas and how he has created this program. And that was very clear, actually, with the executions in Minneapolis, right? It was so clear that the entire administration was flailing because Stephen Miller was calling all of the shots. Yes. First, Noam was getting called out. She was like, I'm just taking Stephen Miller's orders. And so I actually brought this up on another podcast the other day, where I think what really needs to happen is an increased focus on Stephen Miller and an increased focus on how he is puppeteering Trump to be able to enact what is very much ideological for him. And that's why it's so dangerous. And if Trump, we're seeing him be seen as the one pulling Trump's strings, as we saw with Musk for a while, we could get Stephen Miller discarded, and that actually would have real implications on how this administration is approaching immigration. And I think that would be really, really valuable. It would literally save lives in this country, because he also doesn't even have what Musk had to offer Trump, which is billions of dollars, right? And so I feel like that could actually be a very useful strategy for folks that are listening, is putting more attention on Stephen Miller. But I believe that he has blind spots and also just focuses on the things he wants to, which gives enormous leeway, dangerous amounts of power and influence to folks like Stephen Miller, who could never win an election to save their life.
Well, I was going to say Miller is unelected, and often in these situations it is unelected bureaucrats or consultants or advisors who wield so much power. You mentioned the N-word earlier, Nazi. This is a word I've employed more and more recently in my coverage, but it's a word that the American people don't really want to hear and struggle to apply to this analysis. How important is it to actually go there? Because, obviously people in its most simplistic form associate Nazis with Hitler and the Holocaust, but the Holocaust took 8 years to come about, after the Nazi Party kind of came into power. We may be in the early stages of it here, but the people who get it, people who are minorities, not least Jewish people, recognize this rise of the Nazification of American governance.
I think it's incredibly important, both in terms of a contextual understanding of how something like the Holocaust could happen, and we are in a moment of what occurred in Germany in the lead up to that. But also, I just saw this statistic this morning where currently we have more immigrants in detention centers in this country today than there were individuals in the concentration camps at the peak of their holding of individuals, of humans. What is already happening in this country under this administration is a massive human rights violation, right? There are small children, even babies, being held in these detention centers without basic services. So it's different, and yet there are terrifyingly eerie similarities over the treatment of humans by this administration, regardless of their citizenship status. It also includes a number of people who have done the right thing to get their citizenship papers or applied for asylum, children who have birthright citizenship that is not being respected or adhered to. And that is under the design of Stephen Miller, who has quoted Hitler and other of Hitler's senior advisors and folks that colluded with him as folks that he looks up to publicly. This is all very searchable for folks. So I do think it's really important that we draw these very clear connections for folks, because the Holocaust is something that everybody knows about. And, there's something that's also very common and popular online right now, which is like, if you've ever thought about what you would do if you were alive during that time, now is the time to actually understand that what you're doing today is very similar. Because if we are not speaking out, if we are not drawing these connections for folks, if we are not explaining how severe these policies are, how inhumane they are, how unconstitutional, how illegal and barbaric they are, and the slippery slope that normalizing any of this brings us down, in terms of loss of all human rights and freedoms, which seems to be the end game here and is the end game of authoritarian regimes, then we are blindly walking into that obedience.
These camps are being expanded. $137 billion has been earmarked for buying old warehouses and converting them into these concentration camps. And it seems, we only get kind of drip of information from this regime, and there is some great journalism that is being done that finds this stuff out. But I'm starting to realize, by the sheer scale of this policy, is that they probably don't plan to deport people anymore, and that they can't make money if they're deporting people. They can profit from people in detention. And so park that thought for a second, Tara, because that was last week's thought of mine. Let me give you this week's thought, because on Thursday, it was reported that Trump is moving to arrest thousands of people already legally admitted into the US as refugees and detain them indefinitely for aggressive rescreening. This is a new policy from the DHS. They said federal immigration officers can and should arrest anyone who's not yet obtained the right to permanent residence, a green card, and subject them to interviews to assess their refugee claims while they are in custody. So this is reversing the 2010 Obama policy that said failure to apply for a green card within a year of admission was insufficient basis for such an arrest or detention. You put these two stories together, the camps and this adjustment in the law. Well, it's not really even an adjustment of the law, is it? Congress and the Supreme Court have nothing to do with it. This is Trump policy. And to me, this looks like they're going to stop deporting people and they're just going to start holding people indefinitely.
That's right. There's so many places to go with this. First of all, the fact that they wrote it down is new, but they have actually been implementing that quote unquote policy already about detaining and even deporting folks who have received their citizenship. We've seen those cases. This is to further expand that. And also, it is another step in the direction of detaining and deporting American citizens, born American citizens, right? This is not going to stop with folks that at one point in time did not live in this country, were not born in this country. That the goal is far more expansive than just undocumented or recently documented Americans. I do want to give a massive shout out to some of the great reporting you mentioned. Cam, who is our senior political reporter at Courier, he actually broke the story with an interactive map of the detention centers, because to your point, those have not been, the administration has not been outspoken about those at all. It has been a drip, and Cam has done incredible investigative reporting on this to build this map. Folks can see it at couriernewsroom.com, but it's also led to an enormous amount of coverage, reporting, and response by governors and state attorneys generals who were not even aware of these detention centers being purchased and being retrofitted in their own states, and figuring out how, if at all, they can fight back against them. You pair this with the cropping up of data and AI centers, of which there is enormous local opposition to. And it's actually quite powerful, because this is directly impacting local communities who are outright mobilizing against these detention centers and these data centers. And we actually need more physical opportunities for opposition and protest. And so there's no silver lining to be found in these detention centers, except for the fact that mobilization is occurring to ideally shut them down. There was a woman who set one on fire, and they came out and said they're not going to put the detention center anymore. I am not encouraging that at all for other folks to do. That is illegal. Do not set things on fire. But there are ways to actually throw more sand in these gears and stop this. And I just do want to lift that up, that's important, because as all of us are looking for what more we can do, local opposition and mobilizing against these things actually is quite effective and builds more awareness of what they're doing, because that is not who we are as Americans. We are not going to have detention centers that are literally there to dehumanize people, disappear people, murder people, innocent people who were trying to play by the rules, or did play by the rules to come into this country, all for the sake of profiting what I imagine are a few white male millionaires and billionaires who are making money off of these centers and these services. So the amount of violations and illegality embedded in this entire enterprise, it's really just baffling. And we just need to stay laser focused on how do we shut it down, like a game of whack-a-mole. But it's true that we can make this far more difficult to them, and people on the ground in so many communities across America are doing that actively. And I just want to commend them.
There was a 1 million square foot warehouse in Hutchins, Texas. The owner found out that the organization trying to buy this building was the DHS to use for an ICE detention center, and then refused to sell it to them. I mean, this is another good example of how the community can actually get involved at a kind of grassroots level. It's like, I do not want my building used for those purposes. And hopefully, I mean, that was in Texas. I mean, you know, this is a sign. I mean, the other thing I wanted to say to you about maps, which I think is kind of interesting that you mentioned that, is if you were to put a map of the areas in the US where these ICE raids have been going on and people are being snatched, such as Minneapolis and, you know, Los Angeles, it perfectly lines up with the voting map from 2024. And it's basically areas that didn't vote for Trump are the areas where ICE are focusing.
That's right. It's either where he has, you know, a personal vendetta against the politicians and the electorate in these states and in these cities, and also where, you know, we believe that they probably want to maintain a presence, a physical presence, to fearmonger in hopes of keeping especially Black and brown communities away from the polls come election time. The next stage, which we've all been waiting with bated breath for, is for him to declare the Insurrection Act and declare martial law so he can just put troops everywhere in this country. I do expect there will be some version of that in advance of the midterms this year, because they are going to pull all of the stops possible to impact turnout and and decrease and depress turnout in elections because they know they cannot win because a tsunami is coming. We're seeing this in states where we have seen literal over 30-point swings from districts and places where Trump won by high double digits, swinging to Democrats in special elections in places like Louisiana and Texas. They know what's coming, and so they are going to do everything, including place troops outside of polling locations to deter folks from going.
Yes. And aside from the effects of the SAVE Act and preventing people from accessing ballots, removing drop boxes are gone, mail-in voting will be gone, anything to suppress the vote where possible. I have a sneaky suspicion that could backfire on them as well. I don't know that they're doing it based on any data, but they also own Dominion voting systems now, and so they have control of the machinery. We can talk a bit more about voting, but I also want to talk about the FCC in just a minute. We're going to take a quick break and come back and do more with Tara McGowan here on The Weekend Show. Cold days, big goals, no time to cook. Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So eat well without planning or cooking. Quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. No refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, no refined seed oils. Meals that fit your goals and schedule. Healthier eating, calorie management, and more protein. Choose from 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh and delicious through winter. Options include high-protein, calorie-smart Mediterranean, GLP-1 support, and ready-to-eat salads. Plus, the new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. Factor is always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes. No prep, no stress. Head to factormeals.com/weekend50off and use code weekend50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan. One free breakfast per box for 1 year while subscription is active. I didn't realize how much a mattress could change my nights until I switched to my Lisa. It has a soft, upscale feel that genuinely makes me look forward to bedtime. If you've ever slept on a mattress that feels like it was designed exactly for you, then you've come to the right place. I love how intentional and sustainable the materials of the Lisa mattress feel. The thing I love most about my Lisa is how effortlessly it blends elegance and precision. I get that soft, calming sink-in moment, but the support is tailored so perfectly to my sleep habits that I wake up feeling so aligned. Lisa has a lineup of beautifully crafted mattresses tailored to how you sleep. Each mattress is designed with specific sleep positions and feel preferences in mind. Lisa isn't just about sleep, it's about impact. They donate thousands of mattresses each year to those in need, while also partnering with organizations like Clean Hub to help remove harmful plastic waste from our oceans. Go to lisa.com for 30% off mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with promo code WEEKEND exclusive for our listeners. That's LEESA.com, promo code WEEKEND for 30% off mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. Support our show and let them know that we sent you after checkout. That's lisa.com, promo code WEEKEND. We're back with Tara McGowan on The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. We were just talking before the break about voting and the midterms. You know, there are lots of fears that people are starting to have. Firstly, you know, you mentioned ICE at the polls and how they could intimidate, and it turns out that ICE are allowed to do a whole lot more than just immigration enforcement. They really are becoming Trump's equivalent of the Wagner Group in Russia, you know, this kind of private army that answers only to him. And obviously with the assassination of Renee and Alex, you know, its tensions are extremely high. And I'm sure that there will be more names that we will be able to use on a first name term to know exactly what those stories are about going forward. That is the kind of tragedy of modern America. Let's just talk to the vote for a second, because it does seem that there are two schools of thought here. I mean, Trump is getting a lot of stuff through as quickly as he can. Do you think that's because he knows that the midterms are a potential threat to him? Because even if Democrats were to win the House, I mean, Trump doesn't bother with the House at all anyway. I mean, he's been bypassing the House for as long as he can. That could change if Hakeem Jeffries becomes Speaker. Obviously, they can have a whole lot more hearings and try and bring some democracy back to the Congress. Or do you feel that Trump is in that place where it's like, I don't need your votes. I got enough votes because, as we suggested earlier, he has all these systems in place now, not least the ICE agents, but in the legislatures and all of these individuals that are going to do a whole lot more work to make sure that the election is his to win.
Yeah, there's no question that they are as aware as all of us are that they are not in any position of strength going into the midterms. I mean, even just historically, if we were not in these unprecedented dark times in America, right? It is traditional that after a president and their party is elected, the midterms, we see a pendulum swing, as we did in 2010, as we did in 2014,
but only if the voting system holds up.
Correct. And so, just before he even walked into the White House again in January of 2025, he was starting from behind when it would come to the midterm prospects. His odds have decreased dramatically since then, right? And Republicans in general. He's not on the ballot. If he were, I think it'd be even worse. But it doesn't matter because we've seen in all of these special elections, we saw in the elections last year in states like Virginia and New Jersey, enormous turnout. All signs point to a tsunami for Democrats, not because of anything Democrats are doing, but as a referendum on this administration in November. And yet, we've even heard Trump say explicitly, we should nationalize elections. Why is he saying that? He is saying that because the one thing he cannot control, the one thing his administration holding the House majority, the Senate majority, and the Supreme Court right now cannot control is elections, because they are run at the state level, as they always have been. This is why 2020, the story of Republicans in Georgia holding the line and not changing the votes and rigging the election per his request, is the thing he cannot stop thinking and obsessing over. When he says that he won 2020, it's because he could not convince the Georgia electors to steal the election for him. And so we know that they are trying everything in their power with the SAVE Act to make it harder for millions of Americans to vote, because it will require you to have your birth certificate or your passport to register to vote. Millions of American women change their name when they get married, so it is different from their birth certificate. They could be denied their ability to register to vote. That is not hyperbole. That is the point. Never mind newer American citizens and things of that nature. Most Americans do not have access to their birth certificate or passport. So if that bill passes, Democrats are not able to stop it with a filibuster, then that is going to have dire implications on voter registration and turnout in the midterms. We also know, as we mentioned earlier at the top of the program, that the Supreme Court is very likely to overturn the Voting Rights Act. Hopefully, if that does happen, it will not happen soon enough where that could have implications on the midterms, but it will have dramatic, horrific implications on the 2028 elections. They are trying to attack vote by mail. They are trying to attack automatic registration in states. They are working across every sphere to be able to impact these elections. And that's just the stuff we know about, right? There's plenty, I'm sure, that we are not aware of. And so, I worry in my darkest moments that, like, if, they can't figure this out because they've lost on key redistricting battles they thought they had bird in hand, like in Indiana and other red states where brave Republicans held the line and were like, no, we're not gerrymandering. So they don't have the numbers they thought they would have from that approach, that I very much worry about them getting so desperate because they do not see a path to be able to rig these elections in their favor, to shutting down to basically shutting down the country. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I worry about it. He is starting a war in the Middle East right now. He's threatened war with Venezuela and to occupy Greenland. Like, he's going to continue to divert attention and up the ante of fear and anxiety in this country in numerous ways that we can predict and not predict, all in the interest of trying to rig or steal these elections in the midterms because he does not have a path for Republicans to maintain a majority. To your question about does it matter if Democrats win the House, because what does he care? He's made the federal government fairly impotent. He cares a lot about the attention, right? Economy and attention. Right. And if Democrats do win by the tsunami, they will, if these are free and fair elections, they do have a bully pulpit of sorts. They do have the ability to introduce impeachment hearings right away, to have far more in-depth investigative hearings and access to things related to the Epstein files, which shockingly we have not talked about yet in this program. But I am personally, it is my belief that the Epstein files are the thing that will take Trump down. If there has ever been a thing, it will be the Epstein files. It is necessary that we keep the pressure on there, and Democrats will have a lot of more authority and ability to drive the conversation. Even without a majority in Congress, we have been able to put them in a defensive posture, as they should be, for the pedophilia ring that this president was, clearly engaged in and mentioned 1 million times in the files. And so he is scared of that, I think. He knows he can't prevent it by his own merits. And I do think that he worries about losing the narrative thread in addition to some political clout and power should Democrats win the House. And it's becoming increasingly clear they have a strong chance at winning the Senate. And that changes the entire game.
I suppose with Trump, just the stuff that has been done, and in my mind, I'm thinking about those fishing boats that he torpedoed with drone strikes and killed over 100 people. And then when he was asked about it, he said, well, they shouldn't be there. And if they come, we are just going to kill them. Dead, he said. This weird, chilling moment where he kind of exposed that he is a murderer. People are, well, he's different to Hitler. No, he is the same. He does not value life as any normal human might. And there are so many of these atrocities, stuff that doesn't even get covered. I mean, he's killed more civilians in Yemen than any other president, that he can't really leave office, can he? Because he has committed so many crimes, international law and war crimes, that he wouldn't survive on the outside.
No, nor would he have before the 2024 election, Anthony. I'll remind you, he would have gone to jail with his convictions and the additional cases that were, dismissed when he was elected.
Right, but he might not have been up in The Hague that time. And so that's what's changed.
Correct. There's a lot on the internet calling for bringing back public executions, given the severity of the crimes and the corruption that is coming to the surface right now of this administration and beyond it. Of course he knows that. I do not believe that he will ever willingly leave the White House. I have long believed that he would need to be, physically removed. They have been very outspoken. Steve Bannon, Trump himself, J.D. Vance about the idea of, changing the Constitution, him running again. They sell Trump 2028 hats in the White House gift shop. This is, do they have the ability to do it right now? No, not technically, but that doesn't mean very much. They're ignoring court orders right and left. They are ignoring the Constitution and defying it right and left. So there is no floor here, and that's important, right? We're all living in a world now where it is upside down because we don't have the checks and balances that we once had, whether those were somewhat just faith-based and we maintained them or not. Now we don't have them any longer.
Well, it was very comforting language while it lasted, right?
Sure wasn't it? We all slept better then. And so I don't think any of us knows exactly what it looks like, but I think a lot of folks are very keenly aware that it's going to take more than a free and fair election to get him out of power. You mentioned that we're watching him rot physically. Right now we are, but I can never put faith in folks going quickly who have evil in their soul.
Yeah, so. No, I happen to think he's going to outlive many of us. He is just unfortunately built of stronger stuff in that way. despite his diet.
That's where my spiritual side believes he is here to teach us all a lot of lessons and to build a very different system when this one is fully done.
I mean, that really is a cup half full thought, and I'm going to stay with you on that because from a social perspective, I mean, a lot of Americans were disengaged with politics for a long, long time. And this did create an exceptionalism that is widely written about where there hadn't been any mainland war. And so consequently, it was really quite an easy life for many. Admittedly, the country is flawed in terms of not providing any kind of welfare support or universal health care, things that it could really do with. But people did live pretty, comfortable and private lives and were able to kind of get on and not engage with politics. But that definitely changed when their neighbors started being kidnapped. And where their friends couldn't come visit because they were coming from a majority Muslim country. Things now are touching everybody. And I do feel that if there is any upside to Trumpism, it's that there is an engagement in politics now that I don't think we've really seen before at this level.
No, that's exactly right. And it goes beyond the engagement in politics. I believe that there's a collective reckoning happening. Right? Where, the facts that are now in front of all of our eyes were only reserved for what we called conspiracy theorists and fringe groups for a long time. Yes. This has been really challenging my psychology and the way that I think about how I have perceived the world and what things I have believed, right? The fact that this is all coming to the surface feels very powerful. There is no turning back. There's no putting all of this information back into the genie's bottle. There was a post I saw on social that really struck me the other day about how it was some guy saying I sound like a lunatic every time I talk to anyone, but I am reading directly from the United States Department of Justice's website.
Yes.
We all are having this moment of what is real and what is not, and being told now what is real and having to process that and understand that. And the beauty is when we all have processed more, because we are now in the fog of it, if you will, the dust will settle a bit and there will be clarity in terms of what we will never return to again, which wasn't possible before this reckoning. It truly wasn't, right? The corruption was normalized, accepted even, right? It did.
Well, it was hidden even, wasn't it?
Yeah, but
the corruption's not hidden anymore.
Americans always knew there was corruption, right? And that's what drove a lot of the apathy as a country that doesn't have compulsory voting, which I would love for us to have. But right, and so now apathy is being challenged because conspiracy theories are now validated, right? So those folks are like, wait. There are more folks that are becoming attuned to what has been going on and what has been protected and enabled. You and I have talked about this on former appearances and shows, so I know that you're a deep ally in this. But this is really challenging the patriarchal system in a really, really, really significant way. So I derive my hope right now and my motivation from the fact that there is no going back to that deeply flawed, corrupt system that was upheld by both parties in this country and can no longer exist. And this is happening at a time where there are new rising leaders who are touting economic populism and fairness and equality in ways that were not possible, that were written off as fringe or far left.
And they're not taking corporate money either. They are proving that they can do it without these huge corporate donations.
So it really is shifting the Overton window in terms of the politics and the new floor that we will build for what is possible and what is necessary and what is acceptable by the electorate and the American people. And I also hope that in this election this year and in 2028 increases the activated, engaged electorate in this country in a way that nothing else has. So there is enormous hope to be found. I also do believe that it never really works out for the bad guys in the end. It really doesn't. I do believe that the good guys
dictators always
prevail.
Right.
It's just how long will it take, how much trauma and chaos and devastation, destruction, and death will it take to get there? That's the part. It's how much of that can we mitigate on the road to building a better system and being able to have Trump and MAGA in the rear view. And I do believe it's possible. I just don't know how long it'll take.
Destruction and death used to just be a phrase. Now it actually means something.
Very much so.
And that's the tragedy. Let's just talk finally about the media and how Trump is trying to control it where possible. I mean, we know that his friends, the Silicon Valley bunch who own a bunch of media now, Jeff Bezos with the Washington Post, and these firing of thousands of journalists and reframing it and reshaping it, and in many cases in Donald Trump's image where possible. But I mean, even Stephen Colbert, who's already been canned, I mean, his show ends in May, but was prevented from interviewing James Tallarico, Texas congressional candidate, because of this so-called election period. A whole bunch of stories were told about it. Brendan Carr, they kind of changed the story multiple times. The show, it backfired for them in the end, didn't it? Because, of course, Tallarico's interview that was recorded actually went out on YouTube and saw over 10 million views, way more views than it would get on traditional over-the-air media. So it backfired from that perspective. But what it did is it exposed how Donald Trump is trying to manipulate the media where he can. And Brendan Carr talks a good talk, but he is 100% in the tank for Trump and protecting his interests, especially when it comes to the election. So how did you feel when you saw the interview eventually, but also when you knew that this was coming, and how Colbert kind of dealt with it, which he did head on?
Yeah, I mean, Brendan Carr is not nearly as, I hate to even use the word smart, but strategic, I'll say, as Stephen Miller. But I will say that I think that he has been empowered to go a little bit rogue in certain ways, as they all have.
Yes.
And this is not the first time that he has overstepped, right? In a big way that clearly was not probably a consensus decision, though it certainly could have been in the administration. But the fact that they believed that imposing these orders on CBS and Stephen Colbert to not only not have James Tallarico on the program and have that broadcast on television, but also not to talk about that decision had such enormous backlash, because massive kudos to Stephen Colbert. He understands that this was going to drive so much more attention if he defied those quote unquote orders. Right. And it did. And so they look very, very, very foolish, because to your point, it had the adverse effect of what they were trying to impose, which was censorship. Right. And the American people do not want censorship. We saw this with Jimmy Kimmel when they overstepped on that front, because once again, that came about. And the response came about because of Brendan Carr speaking candidly in a podcast with, I believe it was Benny Johnson, a right-winger. Right. So it wasn't actually like a press release from the FCC or the administration. This is Brendan Carr, and he has a vendetta against these folks. And so it had an incredible effect on once again raising the awareness of Americans of censorship and how they are trying to censor speech in this country, and do it with folks as nationally beloved as Stephen Colbert. What an unbelievable misstep! But we need to take it very, very seriously, because this is the posture and an agenda of this administration to censor free speech in this country, whether it is citizens practicing their constitutional rights to free speech and protest in places like Minneapolis and Los Angeles, to folks like nationally beloved comedians like Stephen Colbert.
Two white Christian men, interestingly. I mean, that for me was another angle that people hadn't really talked about, is that these are two individuals who both talk about their faith very openly, and they weren't far right enough for the Trump movement. The Christian nationalists clearly have a completely different agenda. But
this is also like just politics 101. If you want to diminish or hurt a candidate that you feel is a threat, which they clearly believe James Tallarico is. I mean, James Tallarico said it right in response. I think that they're scared we're going to flip Texas. Yeah. When, not if, when Democrats flip Texas, the map looks far worse for Republicans. far, far worse for Republicans. And Texas is on a track towards that. And I also want to lift up Jasmine Crockett is running a phenomenal campaign, is also incredibly loved and supported. And I think the two of them running is the best thing that could have happened in a Texas statewide primary to increase engagement, excitement, mobilization around the primaries. Brendan Carr and the Trump administration just made James Tallarico's candidacy far more powerful. So if their objective was to silence him and to not let more folks know about him, the opposite has now occurred and has worsened their chances in Texas. So it's dumb foolery across the entire board, Anthony. It's ridiculous. And yet the threats against freedom of speech are very serious and have to be taken seriously.
Well, they're actually trying to platform Jasmine Crockett because they don't think people are going to vote for her, which is just this kind of, it's a very weird power play. But as you say, I don't know that they're really smart enough to pull off these types of strategies.
We also have to remember these are a bunch of racists and sexists running the show.
There is that, of course. I just want to stay on the subject of the FCC because they didn't, I don't know if you enjoyed the Super Bowl halftime entertainment. I did very much. I thought it was
very much
bordering on brilliant. Not least things like, Puerto Ricans climbing up the telegraph poles because, of course, they've been left without power for so long, and the corruption of the power companies in Puerto Rico and with, no help from the federal government. The Bad Bunny show was something that Donald Trump couldn't really get out of his head. And now we know that the FCC is investigating the show following concerns from a Republican lawmaker about potential indecency violations. Apparently, Ana Gomez, the FCC commissioner, reviewed the Spanish language transcripts and found no violation of federal rules, dismissing the lawmaker's suggestion as unjustified harassment. Isn't this another example of just trying to create a narrative that doesn't exist, but also to deny the existence of entire communities and cultures and people that are America? It's almost as if that white nationalist view of the US bears no resemblance to the America that you and I know. And they really will stop at nothing to erase this. I mean, they're using this language now, civilizational erasure. They've been using this in Europe, talking about migration there. I mean, to even go as far as to dismiss the Super Bowl halftime show as being in some way political really is blind to what America actually looks like.
Completely blind to what America looks like. I often do this exercise in my brain, Anthony, where I think about, okay, what is the world they want to live in? Because it's not America.
No.
Right? So why don't they just peel off to an island
or Mars,
and live their white nationalist dreams and procreate amongst themselves and have their little commune enclave of I can't even come up with the words that would describe the abhorrence of it, but it is truly as though they do not understand America, the American population, and not just immigrant population, the American population, the DNA of this country, and the principles on which it was founded. They're attacking that on every level, and they are such a minority that has outsized power and a megaphone and influence. They are also weaponizing institutions, right? That in order to be able to attack or threaten or penalize their political and now cultural opponents.
Right. Well, the Kennedy Center is a perfect example of that.
Yes, absolutely. And let's talk about an institution that does understand America and does understand their consumer base and who watches their games and consumes the products their advertisers put in front of them, the NFL, right? I mean, they never once blinked on the attacks about Bad Bunny being the halftime show. And I thought that absolutely deserved enormous credit. Because they have not always been on the side of our shared values as an incredibly diverse, richly diverse country. And so I thought that was excellent that they did that. It was such a beautiful and joyful show. And any post Super Bowl attacks or efforts to try to do that, they just, I mean, I hope and believe that they will fall flat, because it really just does feel like another temper tantrum.
Yes.
Without an end.
I love the fact that he did it all in Spanish. It was inspired, really. And so the first artist to do it all in Spanish, but also the first Latin solo artist to headline. I mean, these were historic things for progress. So does this suggest that actually, despite the white supremacy that is coming out of the White House, ironically named, and all of the issues that we're dealing with, that actually there is pushback? Because sometimes it feels impossible, doesn't it? But things like Bad Bunny stepping up and delivering on a level that was unrivaled suggests to me that there is enough pushback. I mean, also you only have to look at like Oscar nominations for movies. You know, Sinners, my favorite film of the year, just inspired. And again, things that that MAGA Republicans can't control, especially culturally, because they do seem to be completely culturally bankrupt when it comes to the arts and creativity, especially. The pushback is going to come in different ways. You know, if it's not going to come from Democratic Congress people necessarily, or even Republican Congress people doing their due diligence, that it might actually end up coming from the entertainment industry.
Absolutely. And for far too long, and I've experienced this firsthand, having formerly worked on political campaigns and for political organizations, right? There was a small group of the same celebrities or cultural figures you saw come out all the time. We still have them. Bruce Springsteen, his song in Minneapolis, amazing, but he's never not engaged. He's always understood the importance of elections and supporting the right candidates and folks. But right now, what's happening in this country under this administration, it goes so far past partisan politics, where most cultural figures and leaders have avoided in general to not turn off any audience or consumer base, right? From a purely business decision, right? They would not veer into quote unquote politics. What isn't politics today when American citizens are being executed before our very eyes by federal agents? Right? What is partisan about children being kidnapped and thrown into detention centers and not know where their parents are, deported to countries they've never been in? What is American about a pedophile ring in which the president is deeply entrenched in? This is beyond politics, is beyond partisanship. And that is where more and more cultural figures are going to make a massive difference, because it isn't about politics anymore. And they have lost that thread. Yes. And there are so far more of us that share these values and understand that this America that they are presenting, that they are trying to force onto all of us, is not the America any of us want to live in. And it is a losing battle. Once again, it's just how long and what will be lost in the process, but they will lose this fight. And I think what Bad Bunny did and what the NFL did by platforming Bad Bunny in that way was a note to say, we're not scared. Yes. We're not scared of you. We actually have a lot more power than you, and this is how we're going to use it. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that.
I get the feeling that there is a little jealousy in as much as that these kind of this far-right movement that are culturally inept are quite jealous of the fact that they're not included, that they don't get. I mean, we saw this with the alternative Super Bowl halftime show that the Republicans put on that got zero coverage. And in fact, we also saw clips from Mar-a-Lago of Trump watching Bad Bunny.
I was going to say Trump didn't even watch the
exactly. And we've seen this with the hollowing out of the lineup at the Kennedy Center. You know, artists refusing to perform, and Trump's eventual excuse is, "Oh well, I'm going to shut it down for 2 years for renovations," when it didn't need renovating. There is a bit of jealousy from Trump and his group that they have never been able to fit in to this, to kind of where it's at. I mean, the Oscars are coming next. I mean, any artist that gets up and doesn't make a political speech is going to be missing an opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone who has a platform of any type and is not using that platform on a daily basis, never mind in a moment where there's increased national attention on you to talk about this moment and the stakes of this moment and what we all need to be doing to band together in it, is a missed opportunity. And frankly, just, I don't understand the folks who wouldn't be speaking out. I take real issue with that at this point in time. Right. Certainly not when it was just really about partisan politics and elections. So of course we're going to see that, and they will deride it as they do. It truly just continues to feel like a smaller and smaller like lunch table of racists and bullies, and like deep insecurity of these folks, and it's no longer the popular alternative, right? That it was. Frankly, even in the Biden years, this is how quickly things can change and culture can change. It was cooler to be on the outside, right? And be alternative, and Trump was the alternative and the disruptor. And now it's like, oh, you want to be in the camp of the pedophile and the pedophile protectors? Is that who you want to be associated with? Yes. So I think we're seeing enormous drift, and we're going to keep seeing that, because who wants to be in that crowd?
Right. Well, not least with the arrest of the King of England's brother in the last few days.
Long overdue, but long overdue. The first of many dominoes to fall also here.
And I'm hoping, as you say, that this is the start of holding powerful men to account, and women, certainly in the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, who still thinks that she can cut a deal to get out of prison. And the fact that Trump is even considering a pardon is just, it really is, it kind of shows the measure of the man.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't even know how to respond to that, except, of course, she's not an idiot to think that, because that's what he does. So
she knows that she can manipulate him. Yeah,
of course. And the fact that there has not been one single arrest in this country from the files, I am really, really hoping and encouraging that state officials actually play a role in this where they can, because we have a complicit, corrupt federal government. Like, our Department of Justice is not a Department of Justice whatsoever. They are deeply, deeply involved in driving this cover up to protect the president and to protect their allies and administration officials. And so we have to get power back. We have to find other ways to ensure this accountability, because as the reckoning we were talking about, the only way that this country heals and moves forward is with justice, is with accountability. And leaders around the world understand that, and we are seeing them take action and push that accountability forward. And we have got to see the same thing here. And I think that we have started to see new leaders rise here too, that understand that there are far bigger implications to ensuring accountability for these survivors from the Epstein files than just what occurred to those victims and survivors. This is something that has to be done in order to ensure we never, as a country, as a government system, enable and protect behavior like this at any level. And if we don't ensure that accountability and justice, we will never heal or evolve from this moment. And I don't think that's acceptable to anyone.
We have to finish, but I'm so grateful to you for your thoughts, your expertise, also your crusade as well, because clearly this is something that's in your heart, and this is what we need, is people, especially in media ownership, who are driving things for the right reasons and not just because there's a paycheck. And so I'm so grateful to you, Tara McGowan.
And I to you, Anthony. Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. You can find me on Substack at The Anthony Davis. You can also join the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.